So thank you so much for having us. While this may be a pre-recorded presentation, Simon and I'm Alix, will be here afterwards to answer any questions that might pop up. And if any of these objects look interesting to you, keep an eye out because we'll be providing a link to go and have a more detailed look at them later on. So we'll introduce ourselves to start. My name is Alix Thoeming and I'm an educational designer at the University of Sydney. On this project, my job was to develop the teaching implementation. We also have Associate Professor Lesley Beaumont, who was the academic lead on the project and the coordinator of the unit into which these models were placed and taught. And then Simon Wyatt-Spratt, who all of you are very familiar with at this point, and Simon actually developed the models. So today we're going to be outlining the project and the problem that we were trying to address. I'll do that. Simon will outline the modelling process. I'll then talk about the implementation and some accessibility considerations, both for this project and for digital methods in a wider sense. Lesley will evaluate and she will also conclude at the end. So more of an endeavour rather than a problem, this project was designed to further extend access to the Nicholson Collection of the Chau Chak Wing Museum for students in ARCO-1001, Civilizations of the Ancient World, which is a second semester first year subject that introduces students to the classical and West Asian ancient world and enrolls between 120 and 150 students each year. We're very lucky at the university to have access to such a large and diverse collection, but it does pose certain challenges. For teaching. Students must be supervised when accessing objects, and some objects are too fragile, too large, or too valuable to give students hands-on time with. As is a challenge for everyone, our tutorials are large with up to 25 students per class, and any teacher will tell you that an hour is never long enough. And with a 1 hour per student constraint on marking time, it can also be difficult to assess students' comprehension of object-based skills in the time allotted. So photogrammetry seemed like a great solution to all of this, and Simon is going to talk a little bit about the why later. So scoping the new eyes for old objects project was the first thing we needed to do. Then we needed to apply for funding. The big costs in all of this were paying for the hosting service and the display service that we use, which is of course Pedestal. Get the funding. Very important. We're also able to combine with the science faculty on this funding. We gained internal funding from the Chancellor's Committee grant at the University of Sydney, and generally adding another faculty and being interdisciplinary is going to heighten your chances of getting any funding like this. Then we had to identify the objects, which we did with Candice Richards and James Fraser from the Nicholson Collection of the Chau Chak Wing Museum, who graciously gave us access, or gave Simon access, to make the models. Then, of course, we had to make the models, put them into the curriculum, give them to the students, and then evaluate the whole program to plan for what we wanted to do in subsequent years. I will hand over to Simon now to chat about how the models were made.
Photogrammetry was selected as the digital model making method of choice for the pilot project. Photogrammetry offered several advantages to alternate digital model making methods. The first was cost. It's much cheaper to set up a photogrammetry lab than it is to set up a laser scanning one. Choosing photogrammetry meant we could also utilise existing resources of the Chau Chak Wing Museum, such as cameras and laptops, again reducing cost. The second was textures. The experimental biface on the right of the screen has been captured in great morphological detail by the laser scanner. However, it is missing all the surface detail, but texture that might tell us about raw material, patination and weathering, or the presence or absence of residues. The lack of textures was perhaps the most important consideration when choosing photogrammetry, as most artefacts selected to be modelled for the project had decorative features that cannot be captured by laser scanning, such as the glassed alabastron on the left. The overall method of photogrammetry was adapted from Porter et al. 2016. This approach was chosen because it's a low-cost approach that emphasises modelling the object with the minimum number of photographs necessary in order to produce good quality models relatively quickly. Porter et al.'s method focused exclusively on stone artefacts, so minor adjustments were made to account for the wider range of materials that were being modelled for this project. Initial selection of artefacts for the New Eyes on Old Objects project aimed to showcase a range of archaeological materials to align with the Archaeology 1001 curriculum, and to show off the strengths and breadth of the Nicholson Collection. Artefacts were primarily selected from the ancient Mesopotamian and ancient Mediterranean collections, and included pottery, glass, metal and stone artefacts. Artefact selection changed during the modelling process, as objects of highly reflective or translucent surfaces, or thin edges, were not able to be modelled to sufficient quality with the equipment available and within the time frame of the pilot. A more advanced photogrammetry setup and an extended time frame would have allowed for these objects to be modelled. Artefacts were photographed between 70 and 120 times. Models were then made in Agisoft Metashape. Completed models were then decimated in MeshLab in order to make them more web-friendly. Models were then uploaded to Pedestal 3D, an online model hosting platform chosen for its digital museum-esque display, intuitive user interface, and discipline-relevant options for object manipulation. Since this pilot program took place in 2018, the Department of Archaeology at Sydney Uni has since invested significantly into developing its photogrammetry capabilities. Some of the more recent models, produced by Madeline Robinson, are of much higher quality than we were able to do for the initial pilot program, and will form part of the opening exhibitions of the newly refurbished Chau Chak Wing Museum later this year. The model-making process had both successes and shortcomings. The Millefiori glass bowl posed a particular problem. The bowl is semi-translucent and the rim of the bowl is only a few millimetres thick. While the composite mosaic patterning has been captured clearly, even if it is perhaps a little too dark, the rim of the bowl was poorly captured and is jagged, which you can see on the image on the far right, when in real life it is rounded and smooth. As the purpose of these models was a teaching tool and not for morphometric analysis, minor inaccuracies were considered acceptable if they did not detract from the learning experience of the students. While well-captured, high-resolution models were the ideal, it was recognised that for the pilot project, the perfect should not get in the way of the good. There is also educational value in including imperfect models. Photogrammetry, like other forms of model or image making, is an interpretive act that has its own strengths and limitations. Even the best models are an approximation of an artefact, not a perfect replica, and it's important that students recognise that, like a photograph or archaeological drawing, a photogrammetric model reflects the decisions and technical choices of the archaeologist who made it. Overall, the team was happy with the quality of most of the models produced for the pilot. One of the better models, the copper alloy axe on the left, has the corrosion clearly captured in the texture, and the morphological detail is high. You can clearly identify the remnants of the wooden handle preserved in the socket. The ability to clearly identify artefact attributes and features was crucial for how the models were used as a teaching and assessment tool. And I'll hand it back over to Alix to explain exactly how that was implemented.
Thanks, Simon. So, as mentioned, the 3D models were uploaded to Pedestal and from there integrated into 4 formative multiple choice quizzes. These quizzes followed face-to-face tutorials themed around artefact material, one on stone, one on ceramic, wood, and glass. Face-to-face tutorials, therefore, could focus on skill transfer and acquisition, with these quizzes then assessing the students' understanding. These quizzes alternated standard questions with 3D object questions, and here's my chance to plug multiple choice questions as a surprisingly good way of assessing students. They're traditionally thought of as a bit simple and basic, used only for assessing basic knowledge, but if thought of in a real-life way, can be quite challenging. In this question here, students are given a scenario where they have to use their knowledge of the interaction of metals, in this case iron, with their environment, in this case freshwater, to come up with a conservation plan. Certainly moving towards higher level synthesis here. Things to consider from a curriculum side when implementing a solution like this are the hosting platform. Pedestal was fantastic for us as it's been designed to simulate an interactive gallery and has lots of useful tools, and we could use those tools to assess skill acquisition. The most used ones within this project were those tools which provided the ability to measure objects, change their lighting, zoom in and out, and create and use annotations. And students were variably asked to measure size and features, to change lighting to uncover features. In this one, for example, the fact that the object was wheel thrown rather than hand molded, and to identify object types and manufacturing techniques. The use of a tool like this also helps in the development of digital skills and gives students an insight into photogrammetry as a really valuable skill for them to take into their future careers. This innovation has also helped teaching staff make the most of their in-class time, and I'm sure in 2020 especially has proven extremely valuable for the delivery of online tutorials. So here I'm going to play a quick video that outlines the steps students work through in one of their 3D model questions. So in this question, students are asked to measure a blade produced by a scar on a core object. Students navigate to the object, finding it through the annotations. They might zoom in there. They find the relevant tool. In this case, they're looking at a measuring tool, changing to the unit that we traditionally work in, which is millimeters, and then place 2 points on the object to measure. Once they've done that, they enter the answer in the box. And of course, we provide a little bit of a buffer here because not everyone is going to measure their objects exactly the same way. One thing that must be considered in all of this is accessibility. So digital objects can in many ways be more inclusive for people who can't access museums and collections, and there are lots of reasons for that, but they can also often be less inclusive. Accessing 3D models requires good internet and a good computer, and students are often less tech savvy and less equipped than we might think. Students with sensory disabilities, in particular those related to sight, touch, or spatial awareness, may also find access tricky. Image descriptions, which are a really common solution, can only go so far when students are asked to deeply engage with these objects. Objects can be 3D printed, but quality can be heavily variable and dependent on printers available. If you look really closely at this object, you can see the printing layers in the model. So how did and can we improve this? So for a start, students can be provided with access to models early through galleries to try manipulating models and using the tools we'll be asking them to work with in their assessments. We can also offer guided tutorials, either in class or online, to show students how to use them. Writing clear instructions for use and offering support pathways is really important. We discovered during the first run of the first quiz, in the first year this all ran, that devices with low screen resolution would need to have their browsers zoomed in or out to access the models properly. And we also need to think about inclusion strategies. When planning this, our preliminary solution for students unable to access the digital models was to 3D print the objects and then offer written or spoken descriptions. Of course, we could have always just had those students take the quizzes without the model question, but that's not inclusion, that's exclusion. This is something that we as a community need to be mindful of and work together on as a real priority, because greater inclusion benefits all of us. And now I will hand over to Lesley to evaluate and conclude.
First introduced to our first year students in 2018 and employed again in 2019 and 2020, the 3D artifact models proved to be a highly effective and popular way of enlivening and extending authentic approaches to interactive learning in archaeology. Student reception of the 3D imaging initiative was captured in 2018 through the addition of feedback questions into the Canvas quizzes in which the 3D artifact models were used, and approximately 90% of students responded to these questions. Very few technical or usability issues were reported, and when they did occur, they were easily resolved. Students reported high levels of engagement and satisfaction in being able to work with the models independently and in a context where they were not constrained by time, meaning that they were able to continue their learning at their own pace. They were also impressed by the quality of the models and enjoyed the interactive nature of the assessed quizzes. They also greatly appreciated the out-of-hours accessibility provided by the 3D models to at least parts of the museum collection. In conclusion, the creation of virtual hands-on learning for archaeology students via the application of 3D artifact modeling has proven highly successful. Originally intended as a way to complement and extend face-to-face learning when we began this project in 2018, we could not then have foreseen that the COVID pandemic of 2020 would mean that these 3D models would become the primary authentic learning experience for many of our international and domestic students who are now unable to attend face-to-face tutorials on the university campus. Future plans for expansion of the project include not only the scanning and 3D model creation of further artefacts from the Sydney University Museum's collections, but also the use of the existing models in the generation of 3D printed copies of artefacts, so that these can be made available to students outside of formal class time, and also without the need for supervision by museum or academic staff. Thank you.